The sound of the slap echoed across La Scala like a gunshot. Every head turned. Forks froze midair. Someone dropped a wine glass, and it shattered against the tiled floor. But Maria Russo didn't flinch. Everyone in the trattoria knew what it meant when Don Marcello Vitale's temper flared. The man owned half of Brooklyn, the kind of power that came with armed guards and whispers in every corner. And yet, there she stood, 26 years old, broke and furious, glaring at him with her apron still tied around her waist like a suit of armor. Marcello leaned back in his chair, the picture of calm menace. A half-smile curved his lips, dangerous and amused. "You got something to say, ragazza?" Maria met his gaze, jaw tight, and said the words that would change her life forever. "Touch me again," she said, her voice steady as a gun barrel, "and I'll feed you your Rolex with a side of linguine." The silence that followed could have choked the air itself. Even his bodyguards hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or reach for their weapons. Marcello just watched her, unblinking, unreadable, as if a storm had just dared the ocean to fight back. Before we continue, like this video and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Maria didn't sleep that night. Not after the slap. Not after her coworkers whispered warnings behind the kitchen door. And especially not after the two men in black suits knocked on her apartment door just before midnight, asking her politely, if tensely, to come with them. She stared at their polished shoes for a second too long before slipping on her coat, ignoring the fear clawing at her ribs. The car was black, of course, sleek, armored-looking, and smelling faintly of expensive leather and menace. Neither man spoke. Not even when she asked where they were going. The silence made her more nervous than threats ever could. Maria folded her arms and stared out the window, wondering what kind of idiot she had to be to climb into a Mafia car without telling anyone. They didn't take her to some abandoned warehouse or creepy alley. Instead, they pulled up to a stately brownstone in Williamsburg, its brick facade glowing warm under the street lamps. A wrought iron gate clicked open as they approached, and she caught a glimpse of a manicured courtyard with actual roses, because why wouldn't a crime boss have a garden? One of the men opened her door and gestured without a word. Maria stepped out, spine straight, heart pounding, jaw clenched so tightly she thought it might crack. Inside, the place was somehow colder than the street. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere, like the air had too many secrets in it. A chandelier hung from the ceiling like a frozen storm, and the furniture looked like it cost more than her student debt. She was ushered into a study filled with shelves of books that didn't look like they'd ever been touched. And there, behind a massive oak desk, was Don Marcello Vitale, in the flesh, sipping scotch like he hadn't upended her life 6 hours earlier. "Miss Russo," he said, not bothering to stand. His voice was calm, almost amused, like this was a social call. Maria didn't sit until one of the men nudged the chair behind her with unnecessary insistence. Marcello watched her like she was a chess piece he didn't quite know how to move. She returned the stare, equally unreadable. "You expected something else," he said finally. "A hitman, maybe?" Maria didn't blink. "I expected to wake up in the Hudson," she said. Marcello smiled faintly. "If I killed everyone who annoyed me, I'd run out of staff by Tuesday." His gaze sharpened, just slightly. "You're not afraid of me." "Should I be?" "Most are." "Maybe they have something to lose," Maria said. "I don't." Marcello leaned back, folding his hands loosely in his lap. "How old are you?" 26. "Where'd you grow up?" Maria shrugged. "Brooklyn. Foster homes. No one place long enough to unpack." His eyes narrowed like he'd expected defiance, not honesty. "You don't lie easily," he said. Maria arched a brow. "What would be the point? You already know everything about me, don't you?" Marcello didn't deny it. Instead, he stood and walked around the desk, slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. He perched on the edge of the desk now, less Don and more man, but only slightly. "There's a problem," he said. Maria crossed her arms. "Other than the fact that you think bringing me here isn't deeply insane?" He ignored that. "Someone in my organization is working with the feds." Maria blinked. "And you think I care? Why?" Marcello tilted his head. "I think you're clever. Observant. Brave to the point of reckless. That's a polite way of saying suicidal. He smirked. I think you notice things others don't. And I think you're angry enough to be useful. Now that made her pause. You want me to spy for you? I want you to work for me. She laughed, sharp and humorless. Doing what? Topping off wine glasses while dodging bullets. Marcello didn't smile this time. I want you in rooms my men wouldn't think to watch. Parties, dinners, sit-downs, places where eyes matter more than guns. Maria stood. You're insane. He didn't stop her. I called you out. You should have had me disappeared. Instead, you want me to be your Mafia intern. You'd be paid well, Marcello said simply. She turned, ready to walk. 25,000 up front, he added, like it was an afterthought. Maria froze. He continued, voice smooth. Cash. No strings. You observe. Report. That's it. She turned back, slower this time. And if I say no? Marcello's smile returned. Then you walk out that door, and we pretend none of this happened. I'm not in the business of forcing loyalty. Maria stared at him, trying to decide if he was lying. But the truth was, she needed the money. More than that, she needed to know what he saw in her. She thought about her bank account, currently negative. The eviction warning. The bruises on her pride from too many years of being underestimated. This man, dangerous as he was offering her a seat at a table she was never meant to touch. That was tempting in ways she didn't want to admit. What happens if they find out I'm working for you? You'll be under my protection. And if it's you I need protection from? Marcello looked genuinely curious. Would you still call me out in a room full of my men? Maria's eyes didn't flinch. Absolutely. Something like respect flickered across his face. Then you'll survive this just fine. Maria exhaled slowly. It wasn't trust, but it was something. And she was already in too deep to pretend otherwise. Fine, she said. I'll do it. Marcello nodded. Good. On one condition, she added. He raised an eyebrow. I'm not one of your girls. I don't fetch coffee, I don't wear heels, and I don't answer to pet names. Marcello chuckled low. Understood, Miss Russo. Maria. He looked pleased. Maria, then. You start tomorrow. She sat back down, already regretting everything. What exactly am I starting? There's a gathering tomorrow night. My cousin's birthday. Fancy. Dangerous. Maria sighed. What do I wear? Something that makes you look harmless. She smirked. People underestimate me in an apron. I meant a dress, he said, standing. But I like your fire. He turned toward the door. Someone will deliver what you need. She rose and walked to the threshold, pausing as he opened the door. Why me? She asked. He glanced sideways. Because you saw the devil up close and didn't blink. She held his gaze. I've seen worse. He nodded once. That's what I'm counting on. Maria stepped into the hall, her mind spinning. She'd come expecting to be silenced. Instead, she was leaving with a job offer from the most powerful man she'd ever met, and all it cost her was her better judgment. As the car pulled away from the brownstone, she wasn't sure if she'd just made the smartest move of her life, or the last. Maria stared at the garment bag draped across her twin mattress like it was radioactive. It had been there when she got home, along with a note that read, neutral, elegant, forgettable. Inside was a champagne-toned cocktail dress, fitted but modest, paired with nude heels and a clutch small enough to offend anyone with practical taste. It was everything she wouldn't pick, but when she tried it on, she had to admit, it worked. The girl in the mirror wasn't Maria the waitress. She was Maria the decoy, the watcher, the new shadow in a room full of wolves. At exactly 7:15, a black car pulled up outside her building. The driver nodded once, didn't ask her name, and opened the back door like she was royalty or trouble, maybe both. The ride was silent except for the occasional sound of Maria's heels tapping against the floor mat. She checked her lipstick once, then again, hating the flutter of nerves in her stomach. This wasn't her world, but tonight, she was walking straight into it. The dinner was being held at Terraza, a private rooftop club in Lower Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of the city that only money could afford. When the elevator doors slid open, Maria stepped out into velvet, jazz, and too many eyes. Men in tailored suits, women in gowns that shimmered like water, waitstaff trained to be invisible. And at the center of it all, Don Marcello Vitale, flanked by his guards, smiling like a king who already knew every move you'd make before you did. His gaze found Maria instantly. She felt the weight of it, the way his expression flickered, just for a second. Surprise, maybe. Approval. But no warmth. Not here. He gave a small nod, and one of the guards escorted her to a table near the back, just close enough to see everything, just far enough to be ignored. Blend in. Observe. That had been his instruction. Maria could do that. She'd spent years watching people from behind trays and wine bottles. She knew how to read a room, who mattered, who faked it, who had something to hide. But tonight, she wasn't just reading. The party was in full swing. Marcello's cousin Giovanni, a bloated man with a permanently ruddy face, was already on his third toast. Laughter bounced off the chandeliers, expensive cigars lit up like stage lights, and the smell of truffle oil hung heavy in the air. Maria kept her posture relaxed, smile faint, eyes sharp. That's when she saw him, Luca Vitale. Marcello's younger brother looked like the kind of man who always had a backup plan. Tall, charming, eyes too quick. He worked the room effortlessly, shaking hands, cracking jokes, whispering in ears. But Maria watched him pause briefly at the bar, speaking to a courier who handed him a small envelope. Luca tucked it into his jacket with barely a glance. Later, during Giovanni's fourth toast, which sounded more like a campaign speech, Maria caught Luca checking his watch. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. He wasn't drinking much. He wasn't laughing. And his eyes, they kept landing on Marcello. At one point, Luca leaned in to speak with a man Maria didn't recognize, square jaw, gray suit, too quiet for someone so obviously expensive. Their conversation was brief, hushed. But when the man left, Maria noticed something tucked into his palm, sleight of hand, too smooth to be casual. She'd served enough gamblers to recognize a pass-off. Whatever this was, it wasn't just family politics. By dessert, Maria had a headache and a gut full of unease. Marcello barely moved from his seat. He was playing his role, laughing, shaking hands, letting Giovanni bask in the glow. But he wasn't relaxed. He was watching, too. As the guests began to filter out, Maria felt a tap on her shoulder. A guard, the same one from the car. "Boss wants a word," he murmured. Maria followed him through a hallway lined with black and white portraits and into a private lounge that smelled like old whiskey and secrets. Marcello stood alone near a fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. "Well," he asked without turning. Maria didn't hesitate. "Your brother's up to something." Marcello turned slowly. "That's a bold accusation." Maria met his eyes. "It's not an accusation if it's true." She walked him through everything, every glance, every conversation, every twitch of Luca's polished facade. Marcello listened without interrupting, but his face was unreadable. When she finished, he poured himself a drink and took a long sip before speaking. "Luca's blood," he said flatly. Maria's voice sharpened. "So was Judas." Marcello flinched, just slightly. She hadn't meant to hit that hard, but she didn't apologize. "I'm not saying he's the rat. I'm saying he's acting like one." Marcello set the glass down with care. "You think I haven't been watching?" "I think you're too close," Maria said. "And you?" "I've had to watch my back since I was 8. Blood doesn't mean safety. Sometimes it's just a longer knife." That gave him pause. The silence between them stretched thick, unspoken, charged. Marcello looked at her then, really looked. Like he was seeing her beyond the dress and the orders. Not as a waitress or a pawn, but as someone who understood more than he wanted to admit. Finally, he said, "You might be right." Maria didn't smile. This wasn't a victory. It was a warning he might finally be ready to hear. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. "Keep watching," he said. "If Luca is what you say, I need to know." "But if you're wrong, I'm not," she said. "You know it too. You just don't want to believe it." He didn't answer. Didn't have to. The truth was already in the room, crackling in the firelight. They stood in silence for a beat longer. Then Marcello moved toward her, slower than usual. "Thank you, Maria." She nodded. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "Just don't ignore me." He gave her a look she couldn't read. I don't think I could if I tried. Outside, the city pulsed with life and danger. The driver opened the car door again, but this time, Maria got in feeling different. She'd stepped into the underworld expecting chaos. But what she found was something worse, order built on crumbling trust. And in that structure, someone had started shaking the foundation. As the car pulled away from the rooftop club, Maria stared out the window, mind racing. She hadn't asked for this. She just wanted to serve food, pay rent, and be left alone. Now, she was watching a kingdom rot from the inside. And the king? He was finally listening. If you were in Maria's shoes, would you have spoken up about Luca, even if it meant risking everything? Or stayed quiet to protect your own safety? Let us know your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see what Maria uncovers next. Trust me, this story's just heating up. Maria had never been afraid of shadows. She'd lived in them most of her life, moving quietly, unseen, learning to read people faster than they could form lies. But now the shadows had names, power, and guns, and she was trying to navigate their world with borrowed armor. Every room Marcello brought her into, every coded conversation she overheard, felt like a test she hadn't studied for. Still, she was passing barely. Marcello didn't say it outright, but his eyes lingered longer now. Not with affection yet, but with a weight she hadn't seen before. He started looping her in more directly. Details about shipments, meetings, movements. Not everything, but enough to know trust was being extended like a lit match, dangerous if fumbled. You ever done surveillance work? He asked one evening, pouring her a glass of wine without waiting for a yes. Maria blinked. You mean spying? Eavesdropping, he corrected. We're placing a tap in Luca's office. She raised an eyebrow. Subtle. Marcello handed her a small velvet pouch with a device the size of a dime. It slips under the edge of his bookshelf. Picks up audio, Bluetooth triggered. Maria turned it in her hand, pretending not to be impressed. You sure you want me to plant this? Isn't that a little obvious? Marcello met her gaze. Not to him. He still thinks you're a distraction. The plan was simple. Maria would accompany Marcello to a family brunch at Luca's condo, something public, safe, surrounded by laughter and pasta. While Marcello kept Luca busy, Maria would excuse herself, slip into the study, and drop the device. 10 minutes, tops. They rehearsed the exit cues like choreography. The day of the brunch, Maria wore a blush-tone blouse and wide-legged trousers, soft, feminine, forgettable. Marcello didn't compliment her, but he didn't need to. His approving glance said enough. Luca greeted them with a hug that lingered too long on Maria. Didn't know you'd be joining us, he said with a smile that felt like a loaded gun. Maria kept her voice light. Marcello drags me everywhere these days. Guess I'm good luck. Luca chuckled, but there was no warmth behind it. She noticed the way his eyes narrowed, not on her, but on his brother. Marcello shrugged. She's got good instincts. Better than some people in the family. The comment landed like a crack in porcelain. They made it to the study after dessert. Marcello pulled Luca into the kitchen to talk business. Maria slipped away, heart pounding, palms damp. She moved fast under the shelf, behind a stack of books, fingers trembling, but steady enough to stick the mic in place. She exited calmly, rejoining the party like nothing happened. Luca didn't look at her when they left, but she felt his eyes on her back. That night, Marcello tested the feed. It worked. They heard everything, calls, names, tension simmering beneath the surface. But someone else had been watching too. 3 days later, Maria left Marcello's office just past dusk. The air was sticky, the city humming like a restless animal. She was crossing the staff parking lot when a voice stopped her cold. You think you know how this world works, waitress? She turned slowly. Luca leaned against a black sedan, tie loosened, smile sharp. Maria didn't blink. You're awfully interested in my career path. He pushed off the car, strolling closer. You're in over your head. She shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. His expression darkened. Let me guess, Maria said coolly. You're here to scare me? No, Luca replied. Just to remind you, being useful doesn't mean being untouchable. Neither does being family. He stopped a foot away, voice low. You're playing a game that gets people killed. Walk away now and maybe no one has to clean up what's left of you. She smiled thinly. I'm not scared of cleanup. I've been doing it since I was 9. He stared at her a second longer, then turned and walked away. Maria exhaled slowly, her hands trembling just slightly. It was a warning. Or a test. And either way, it meant he knew. The next morning, something was off. Her apartment door was ajar when she got home. Not broken, not forced, just unlocked. She entered cautiously, scanning for anything missing. Nothing was until she checked the small lockbox under her bed. Inside were papers Marcello had given her, a cover story, phone list, burner accounts. Now, there was something else. A sealed envelope. With files she'd never seen before. And on top, a printout showing stolen documents traced to her email. Her blood ran cold. It was a setup. Professional, clean, planted so perfectly it would fool anyone who wanted to believe she'd flipped. Maria backed away like the folder was a bomb. Then her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered anyway. Maria Russo? The voice was unfamiliar. Male. Cold. Don Vitale sends his regards. She didn't even have time to scream. Maria came to in darkness. The air was damp, thick with mildew and dust. She was tied to a chair, ankles and wrists duct-taped, mouth dry, ribs aching. A single bulb flickered above her, casting a yellow cone of light that barely reached the corners. The chill in the air told her everything. Stone walls, no windows, probably underground. Wine cellar, maybe. Country house. She strained her ears, no city sounds. No sirens. Just the quiet breathing of someone nearby. A figure stepped into view. Not Luca. Not Marcello. One of the men from the photo she saw at the dinner, gray suit, square jaw. He crouched in front of her. You really should have stayed a waitress. Maria lifted her chin. You really should have stayed irrelevant. He smiled without humor. Marcello trusted you. That's the only reason you're alive right now. She didn't believe that for a second. You're going to disappear, he said calmly. And the only message we'll send is your betrayal. She shook her head slowly. I didn't betray anyone. He leaned closer. Don't worry. By the time the boss sees the evidence, he won't need your confession. Maria stared at him. Then why am I still alive? He didn't answer. But the look in his eyes chilled her more than the room. They left her alone after that. No water. No answers. Just the knowledge that someone wanted her out of the picture, cleanly, efficiently, permanently. She thought of Marcello, of the conversation in the lounge, of the way his expression had softened. Would he even hesitate before believing she'd turned? Maria closed her eyes, rage boiling beneath the fear. If they thought tying her up would break her, they'd clearly never seen what she'd already survived. Foster care. Abuse. Homelessness. Men with fists, systems with silence. This? This was just the next room she'd escape from. Maria woke to the taste of blood and copper in her mouth. Her cheek was pressed against cold stone, and her wrists burned from the bite of zip ties. The bulb overhead flickered like it was gasping for life, throwing long shadows across the damp floor. Her head throbbed with every heartbeat, and her shoulder ached where someone had kicked her when she'd tried to fight. But more than the pain, more than the nausea threatening to rise, was the one relentless thought pounding in her skull. They think I betrayed him. She rolled onto her side with a grunt, biting her lip to keep from crying out. The zip ties cut into her skin with every movement, sticky with blood and grime. Her ankles were free. They hadn't bothered binding them, probably assuming the cellar itself would do the job. One stone wall was crumbling in the far corner, with a small pile of broken brick and mortar collecting like debris after a war. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maria leaned her head back and tried to breathe. The air was thick, and it stank of old mold, rot, and copper pipes that hadn't been used in years. She closed her eyes, letting the darkness flood in, and her mind did what it always did in quiet moments. It went backward. To the nights in the shelter when she'd slept with one eye open, clutching her sneakers in case someone tried to take them. To the sound of her stepfather's belt sliding through the loops of his pants, always the prelude to a bruise. To the day she ran. 15 years old, no money, no map. Just the kind of rage that made you forget how cold the world could be. That was the last time she'd cried for help. That was the day she stopped waiting for rescue. She opened her eyes and wiggled her foot, twisting it just enough to reach the inside of her boot. It took 2 tries, but finally her fingers brushed something smooth and metallic. The lighter. She almost laughed, because the universe had finally handed her back one small win. She flexed her wrist and shifted her body, inch by painful inch, until her fingers found the broken bottle neck she'd spotted earlier near the wine rack. It was caked in dirt and reeked of old Cabernet, but the edge was still sharp. Maria gritted her teeth, positioned the shard against the zip tie, and began to saw. Each movement sent fire through her arms, the plastic resisting her like it wanted her to fail. But pain had never been what broke her. Minutes dragged like hours. Blood slicked her palms. The edge of the bottle slipped more than once, cutting her deeper. But she kept going, breath shallow, forehead slick with sweat. And then snap. The tie split. Her hands dropped to the floor like dead weight, numb and bloodied. She didn't stop. Didn't celebrate. She just crawled to the crumbling wall and started digging with her bare hands. The stone was loose, the mortar weaker than it looked. She pried one brick free, then another. Behind it, blackness. No idea where it led, if it led anywhere. But she wasn't staying to find out what came next if she didn't move. She squeezed through the hole, grunting as jagged edges tore her shirt and skin. The tunnel beyond was narrow, the ceiling low. She crawled like a rat in a maze, one hand clutching the lighter, the other scraping along the wall for balance. Somewhere above her, footsteps echoed faintly, searching, maybe. She moved faster. The tunnel led out behind a tool shed surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken fencing. She stood on shaky legs, breath ragged, bare feet already torn open by gravel. There was no time to rest. The sky above was gunmetal gray, dawn wasn't far off. Maria stumbled toward the nearest road, heart screaming in rhythm with her ribs. A pair of headlights approached in the distance. She stepped into the road and waved her arms like a madwoman, daring the driver to stop. They did. An old Ford truck with a cracked windshield and a driver who looked like he'd seen war. He rolled down the window and blinked. "You okay, miss?" Maria didn't answer. She couldn't find the words. But something in her eyes must have said enough. "Get in," he said. "Where we headed?" She climbed in and hissed as her legs screamed in pain. "Brooklyn," she rasped. "Fast as you can." The man nodded and floored it. Maria leaned her head against the window, the cold glass numbing the heat of her fevered skin. She didn't ask questions. Didn't offer a story. Every breath she took felt borrowed. But she was still breathing. Still moving. And Marcello had no idea that Luca's betrayal was already underway. If she didn't reach him in time, everything would burn. They hit the bridge as the sun broke the horizon, orange and violent. The city skyline rose like a battleground ahead of them. Maria closed her eyes and whispered the only prayer she remembered. "Don't let me be too late." She'd survived the cellar. Now she had to survive the truth. If you had one chance to escape a trap like Maria, what hidden strength would you draw on instinct, memory, or pure will? Tell us your answer in the comments, and make sure to subscribe, because the storm Maria is about to walk into, it's only just begun. The double doors to Waitress Rosa opened like the gates of a church. Maria staggered in, barely upright, blood dried along her arm, her blouse clinging to the wound beneath. She didn't wait for permission. Didn't stop for explanations or guards or logic. She had one name in her mouth and one message that couldn't wait. Marcello Vitale, she barked at the host, who froze mid-greeting. "Back room. Private dinner. Now." The man stuttered, his eyes wide, but Maria was already walking, dragging herself through velvet curtains and toward danger. She didn't need directions. She knew the layout. Marcello had shown her the floor plan 2 weeks ago. The hallway stretched like a test. Each step was agony. Her shoulder throbbed, her legs barely working, her head pounding with every heartbeat. But fear gave way to urgency. She could already hear the muffled laughter behind the last door on the right. The clink of glasses. The lull before betrayal. She didn't knock. She kicked the door open with everything she had left. Chairs scraped. Conversations stopped. Marcello stood at the head of the table, a wine glass raised mid-toast. And next to him Luca, smiling like the devil in a tailored suit. "Don't drink," Maria shouted, breath ragged. "The wine's poisoned." The words hit the room like a bomb. Time fractured. People stood. Marcello blinked, caught mid-sentence. Luca's eyes didn't widen. He didn't gasp. He just turned slowly and drew his gun. Maria dove sideways as the shot rang out. Pain exploded in her shoulder like lightning on bone. She hit the ground hard. The world spun. But she heard Marcello's roar, raw, animal, not language but fury. Another shot cracked through the air. Then another. When her vision cleared, Luca's right-hand man was on the floor, blood pooling beneath his neck. Marcello stood over him, smoking gun in hand, eyes wild. Luca was pinned beneath him, his own weapon knocked aside. "You tried to kill me," Marcello hissed. Luca didn't deny it. "I had to," he spat, struggling beneath Marcello's knee. "You're too soft. You let that girl, that waitress, get in your head." Marcello's jaw tightened. "She saw the truth," he growled. "You fed me lies, poisoned my people, sold us out to the feds." "You're weak," Luca sneered. "I did what had to be done." Marcello's finger twitched on the trigger. Maria, still on the floor, coughed hard and tried to sit up. Her blood soaked the carpet, warm and unrelenting. "No," she croaked. Don't become him." Marcello's eyes found hers. For a moment, he looked at Luca like a man standing over a grave, his own, maybe. Then he lowered the gun. He pulled out his phone instead and hit a contact with a single tap. The line picked up on the second ring. "Agent Green," Marcello said. "I have something for you." He stood, releasing his brother, who gasped for breath. "He's yours now," Marcello said coldly. "Come get him." Luca started to protest, but Marcello backhanded him without a word. Then he turned and walked straight to Maria, kneeling beside her. Her lips were pale, her breath shallow. "You came back," he said quietly, voice breaking for the first time. She tried to smile. "Told you. I'd warn you." He pressed a hand to her wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "Ambulance is coming," he said, more to himself than her. "I didn't betray you," she whispered. "I know," he said, gripping her hand. "I never should have doubted you." Her fingers curled around his, weak but steady. "You're not soft," she mumbled. "You're just not heartless." Marcello looked down at her, something breaking behind his eyes. "Stay with me," he said. "Please, Maria." The restaurant was in chaos now, guests fleeing, staff whispering, sirens in the distance. But in that corner of the world, everything was still. Just her and him. Truth and trust. And a history rewritten with blood. By the time the FBI arrived, Maria was already in the ambulance. Marcello stood outside, his hands behind his back, watching as Luca was led away in cuffs. Their eyes met only once. No words. No promises. Just the ending of a war neither of them had truly won. The ambulance doors slammed shut. Marcello turned to Agent Green, who raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this?" Marcello nodded once. "It ends tonight." Then he followed the sirens into the dark. The beeping of machines was the first thing Maria heard when she woke. A slow, steady rhythm, too precise to be natural. The lights were dim, the room too clean, too quiet, and the air smelled like antiseptic and low expectations. Her shoulder felt like someone had buried a fire beneath the skin, and her mouth was dry enough to crack. But she was alive. Barely. Wrapped in gauze, stitched and sedated, but breathing. For a moment, that was enough. She closed her eyes again, not to sleep, but to remember. She'd stopped the bullet, stopped the betrayal, but what had it cost? The door creaked open, soft and careful. She didn't look. Didn't need to. She knew the cadence of those footsteps, even now. Marcello Vitale didn't enter rooms, he weighed them. He didn't speak at first. Just stood at the edge of her bed, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. The sharp edges were gone. No swagger, no armor. Only a silence that felt heavier than all the noise in the world. Maria turned her head slowly, wincing. "Did I miss the parade?" she whispered, voice hoarse. His lips twitched, but it wasn't quite a smile. "No one's celebrating," he said. "Not yet." They sat in the stillness, the machines humming like background actors afraid to speak over the leads. Maria studied his face, less composed, more human. There were shadows beneath his eyes, a tightness to his jaw. He hadn't shaved. His suit looked slept in. And still, he stood like a man carrying the weight of a kingdom he no longer wanted. "You could have let me die," he said finally, voice barely above a murmur. Maria didn't look away. "You're right." He waited, but she didn't elaborate. "You walked into that dinner bleeding," he added. "You knew what it was." "I knew what you were," she replied. "But I also knew what you could be." Marcello sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath him. "You still think I'm worth saving?" She sighed. "I think not all monsters deserve to win. And some people just need a reason to stop being one." His eyes dropped to the floor. "You were mine." The words fell like a confession in a church, raw, quiet, desperate. Maria blinked. "You were the reason," he said again. The voice in my head that didn't sound like fear or profit. "You told me the truth when everyone else handed me lies. And I didn't listen fast enough." "You did," she said gently. "Eventually." He met her gaze. "It cost you a bullet." She smiled weakly. "Better than costing you your soul." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Outside the window, the city moved on, cars honking, lives unfolding, a world blissfully unaware of how close it came to losing something unseen. Marcello exhaled, long and steady. "I'm done," he said. "With the games. With the war. With the weight of men who want blood more than legacy." Maria swallowed, her throat thick. "You mean it?" He nodded. "I want out. But I can't do it alone. I don't know how to build something that doesn't start with a threat." She looked at him for a long time. "You don't need a soldier," she said. "You need someone who tells you the truth. Who doesn't flinch. Who doesn't care about your title." His mouth opened, then closed. "You need a consigliere," she said, voice firmer now. Marcello leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "No," he said softly. "I need you." Maria's breath caught in her throat. He didn't look away this time. "I need you." "I'm not part of this world," she whispered. "You are now." "I didn't ask for that." "No one does." He paused. "But you survived it better than people born in it." The silence between them shifted. Not heavy this time. Just full. Maria turned her face toward the ceiling. "Are you ready to be someone else?" "I don't know," he said. "But I know who I want beside me while I figure it out." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the room press into her skin. For once, it wasn't from fear. It was from choice. When she opened them again, Marcello was still there. Still waiting. Still watching her like she was the first honest thing he'd seen in years. "You're not forgiven," she said. "Not yet." He nodded. "I wouldn't believe you if you said I was." "But," she added, "you're not beyond redemption either." That drew the first real smile from him. It was tired, grateful, and real. Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, something shifted. Maria wasn't just surviving anymore. She was choosing. And for the first time, Marcello Vitale was ready to follow someone who didn't bow. The first thing Marcello did after Maria was discharged from the hospital was burn a warehouse. Not metaphorically, he literally torched it. The one on 42nd and Piermont, the one Luca used to launder money through fake import invoices. He stood there as it burned, smoke curling into the sky like the last breath of his former life, Maria beside him in a borrowed coat. It wasn't legal. It wasn't clean. But it was necessary. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcello dismantled his empire like a man tearing down a house with his bare hands. He sold off the cash business's first clubs, gambling dens, a few high-end massage parlors. He froze accounts, rerouted assets, shredded contacts like tissue paper. Some of his own men left, muttering that he'd lost his edge. Maria didn't try to stop them. She sat in on every meeting, took notes, asked questions no one else dared. When Marcello couldn't speak plainly, she did. And slowly, the loyal ones began to listen. Vitale Enterprises went from a myth whispered in courtrooms to a registered entity on paper. Real estate, logistics, infrastructure. Marcello redirected old pipelines into clean ventures. Maria found him a consulting firm with enough spine to stay quiet and enough vision to see opportunity in reinvention. They formed a new board. The staff, what remained of them, watched Maria like she was an unpredictable storm. To them, she was the outsider, the waitress who walked through fire and somehow ended up steering the ship. They didn't know whether to respect her or fear her. She didn't care which, as long as they listened. And after she shut down a money-skimming scheme in the construction division within 48 hours of discovery, they did. One morning, during a particularly tense executive meeting, someone finally snapped. It was Tommaso, the logistics head. He leaned forward and sneered, "What makes you think someone like you can run what we built with blood?" Maria didn't flinch. She folded her hands calmly and said, "Because I've spent my whole life cleaning up other people's messes. This one's just larger." The room went quiet. Marcello's eyes flicked her with something like awe. And, just like that, the air shifted. No more muttering. No more questioning. They started following her lead. Word traveled fast. Maria Russo, the woman who'd stopped a coup with a bullet in her shoulder, was now Marcello Vitale's consigliere. She didn't seek power, but she didn't shrink from it either. The media caught on. A whisper became a headline. A headline became a storm. Marcello hated the press, but Maria insisted on one moment of public clarity. "If we want legitimacy," she told him, "we have to show our face. Yours is too dangerous. Mine is just unfamiliar." So he nodded. And the press conference was set. It took place in the newly refurbished lobby of Vitale Enterprises, glass, steel, and silence that screamed money. Maria wore a black suit with no frills, her hair pulled back, her jaw set like it was carved in stone. The cameras flashed. Marcello stood off to the side, shadowed by security, silent but present. The moment belonged to her. Reporters shouted questions. Most were expected: logistics, projections, partnerships. Then came the one that cracked the surface. A woman in the second row raised her mic and asked, "What qualifies a waitress to run a mafia empire?" The room collectively held its breath. Maria stepped forward, eyes sharp and voice calm. "I cleaned up other people's messes my whole life," she said. "This one's just larger." Silence. Then clicks, whispers, a slow wave of realization. Marcello smiled without showing teeth. The clip went viral in under 3 hours. Millions of views. Thousands of shares. From Waitress to War Room, one headline read, "She dared him to change and then helped him do it," read another. Maria didn't care for the fame. But she cared that the city finally saw something new when they looked at Marcello. Not just fear. Not just blood. But rebirth. She and Marcello worked late most nights, building something strange and fragile. Trust. Partnership. A future they could both stand in without shame. And every time he looked at her, she felt the pull of something stronger than redemption. They never called it love. Not yet. But it hung in the air between them, quiet, steady, waiting. A promise made in the silence between all the noise. And neither of them was ready to break it. Have you ever stepped into a role no one thought you deserved and proved them wrong? Share your story in the comments, and if Maria's journey inspires you, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what she does next. The envelope sat on Maria's desk, plain and unassuming, but heavier than paper had any right to be. Marcello hadn't said much when he handed it to her, just that it was overdue. She turned it over twice before sliding her finger beneath the flap. Inside was a deed. La Scala. She stared at the signature at the bottom, his. There was a handwritten note tucked behind it, scrawled in Marcello's sharp, deliberate lettering. "It's where you challenged me. It's where this started. Now it's yours." Maria swallowed hard. The memory came back in full color, the slap, the silence, the way every head had turned and every instinct had screamed at her to back down. But she hadn't. She'd stared down a mafia boss and walked away with nothing but her pride intact. And now he was giving her the building that housed that moment like it was a crown. Or a peace offering. 2 weeks later, the doors of La Scala opened once again, new sign, new menu, same red checkered tablecloths. Maria walked through the kitchen before service started, watching her new staff prep. The energy was different. Sharper, lighter, clean. And no one snapped their fingers. She had made changes, big ones. Every employee now had healthcare and a union rep. Tips were pooled and divided fairly. Every Thursday, they served free lunch to shelter staff and outreach workers, no questions, no bills. Maria knew what hunger looked like. She wasn't about to ignore it. Some of the old staff had returned, cautiously at first. They weren't sure what to make of her, of the rumors. But when she helped wash dishes after their first dinner rush, sleeves rolled and sweat dripping, the whispers stopped. Respect came one shift at a time. And Maria earned it. Marcello visited on a Tuesday night. He came alone, dressed in gray, no guards, no fanfare. He didn't speak as he entered, just looked around the room like he was seeing something holy. He sat in the same booth from that night, the one near the kitchen with the wobbly leg. Maria joined him after the last table cleared. She slid into the seat across from him, wiping her hands on a napkin. Neither of them spoke right away. The silence wasn't awkward. It was familiar now. "You actually did it," he said eventually. Maria smirked. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might get bored." "I don't get bored," she said. "I get busy." He gestured to the room. "It feels different." "It is." She looked around, pride flickering in her chest. They're not scared anymore. Not of the kitchen. Not of the boss. Not even of the future. Marcello tilted his head, studying her. "You turned a battlefield into something warm." Maria met his gaze. "It deserved better." "We all did." He nodded slowly, fingers tracing the rim of his water glass. A server approached with a bottle of red and 2 glasses. Maria raised an eyebrow. "Really?" Marcello gave a half smile. "Tradition." She read the label and laughed. "It's the cheapest bottle on the menu." "Of course it is," he said. Full circle. He poured carefully, the wine sloshing gently into each glass. They raised them in silence. No speeches, no declarations. Just a quiet toast between two people who had defied the odds. "To new beginnings," Maria said. "To second chances," Marcello added. Their glasses clinked, soft and deliberate. She sipped, then set her glass down and leaned back. "Do you miss it?" He didn't pretend not to know what she meant. "Some days," he admitted. "But not the blood. Not the weight. Just the power?" He shook his head. "No. Just the purpose." Maria nodded. "You still have that. You just wear it differently now." He gave her a long look. "And what do I look like to you now?" She didn't smile. "Like someone I trust." That was all he needed to hear. They sat in the warm glow of the dining room, the hum of the city just beyond the windows. La Scala had been a place of fear once. Now it was something else entirely. A testament to what could change and who could change it. Maria had rebuilt more than a restaurant. She'd redefined the story. And Marcello? He'd learned how to let go. Not of legacy, but of violence. Not of pride, but of control. And in doing so, he'd found something far rarer: peace. The seasons changed quietly, like the city itself was learning how to exhale. What was once chaos became routine. Maria now arrived at Vitale Enterprises before anyone else, coffee in hand, blazer creased from use, voice confident. She wasn't the girl who walked into La Scala with duct-taped shoes and a half-dead spirit. Now, she was the one people answered to. Marcello had stepped back, intentionally, methodically. He still reviewed final contracts, met with lawyers, kept certain ties close. But the day-to-day? That was hers. From vendor negotiations to quarterly reports, Maria ran it all like she'd been born for it. At first, the old guard struggled with it. They weren't used to taking orders from someone who used to bus tables. But Maria never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her clarity was sharper than command. She made decisions that protected people, not just profits. The foundation she and Marcello launched for at-risk youth was now fully funded, with mentorship programs and scholarships. She named the first community center the Second Table. "I figured some kids deserve a seat at a better one," she told a local paper. The story went viral for all the right reasons. Marcello watched from the sidelines, more at peace than anyone had ever seen him. He still wore suits, still carried that aura of command. But it no longer entered rooms like a threat. It lingered like legacy earned, not demanded. And more than once, Maria caught him watching her like she was a miracle he'd never dared pray for. They didn't talk much about what they were. It existed in glances, late-night texts, the way he always kept her favorite tea stocked in the break room. Love wasn't rushed between them. It was built, like everything else they'd survived, one steel beam of trust at a time. And it was solid. One Thursday morning, Maria walked into her office to find Marcello already there. He stood near the window, holding a leather folder, his expression unreadable but not cold. "Breaking and entering, huh?" she teased. He turned slowly, eyes gentler than she expected. "I have something for you." She raised an eyebrow. "If it's a check, it better have a lot of zeros." He didn't smile. Instead, he handed her the folder. "Read it." Inside was a contract. At first glance, it looked like another partnership document. Then she saw the heading, Vitale Russo Holdings, LLC. And her name, Maria Russo, co-founder and managing partner. She looked up stunned. "You're giving me the company?" "I'm giving you half of it," he said. "The parts that matter, at least." He took a breath. "I want you as my equal. In name. In life. In legacy." Maria didn't speak right away. Her throat caught somewhere between laughter and disbelief. "This is your empire," she said finally. "It was built with blood and bricks I didn't lay." Marcello stepped closer. "You rebuilt it," he said. "You gave it a conscience. A future. You gave me a future." She stared at him, heart pounding. "No ring," she said, lifting the folder. "Just paperwork?" Marcello smiled, just a little. "I figured this would mean more." Maria stared at the contract a moment longer, then closed the folder and leaned against the desk. "I've cleaned up a lot of messes in my life, Marcello. I know. And this," she said, lifting her eyes. "This is the first one I chose." Then she smiled. Wide. Certain. "Man, don't harass me," she said with a smirk. "Marry me." Marcello blinked. Then he laughed. A real one this time, deep and full. The kind of laugh that shook loose the weight from old wounds. He crossed the distance in 2 steps and kissed her forehead like a promise. "I absolutely dare you," he whispered. "I dare you every day." They didn't announce it. No Instagram post. No gala. No diamond. Just a quiet signature on a document that tied their names together in black ink and shared risk. It was, somehow, the most honest proposal either of them could imagine. And it was perfect. A month later, they returned to La Scala for dinner. No guards. No business. Just 2 people and the booth near the kitchen. The staff barely stared anymore. They were used to seeing their boss wipe down tables or tie her apron mid-service. Marcello still drew looks, but now they were tinted with curiosity, not fear. They ordered the cheapest bottle of wine again. It felt like tradition now. Maria poured this time, her hand steady, her smile unguarded. They toasted in silence. No need for words when the walls remembered the journey. Around them, the restaurant buzzed, servers laughing in the back, families eating, music humming from the old speakers above. It felt warm. Lived in. True. Marcello looked at her, eyes softer than the first night she dared him to be human. "Do you ever think about the beginning?" he asked. Maria chuckled. "You mean when you slapped my ass and tried to fire me in public?" He winced, but smiled. "Yes, that beginning." She leaned back. "I think about it every time I see someone in here who looks like they're holding themselves together with nothing but pride." He nodded slowly. And I make sure we feed them well." He reached across the table and took her hand, thumb brushing her knuckles. And in the restaurant where fear once ruled, he said quietly, love, grit, and second chances now filled every table. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.